and welcome. You're watching QTV and you are watching The Week in Review. I'm your host, Ade Darami, and here with me is friend and co-host Mamadou Mbodj, and my usual greeting, Mr. Mbodj. Welcome to the program.
Cheers, man. Thank you, Ade.
Thank you. And of course, to our viewers, the same greeting. Welcome to the program, old and new viewers alike. The program it's a simple one, just explain it. We have 10 big stories that we've chosen from the week just gone, and we kick them around a bit, discuss them in some details. Some stories we spend a bit longer on than others, but nonetheless, we try and do justice to all of them. So, now, if I said the words Equatorial Guinea, most Gambians probably think of one thing. That's the place where our former president is now residing. But, sorry to disappoint you, this story is not about that. It's about something else. Have a look, have a listen.
The joint agreements signed by Foreign Affairs Ministers Mamadou Tangara and Simeon Oyono Ange are the establishment of diplomatic relations between the Gambia and Equatorial Guinea, a cooperation framework agreement, an MOU on diplomatic consultations between the foreign ministers, an agreement on reciprocal exemption of visas for holders of diplomatic and service passports. The two presidents discussed their determination to lay strong bilateral cooperation between Banjul and Malabo for the mutual benefit of both countries and their peoples. Presidents Barrow and Obiang promised to move from commitment to action to implement the agreement signed through the exchange of delegation visits. President Barrow commended his counterpart for his role in resolving the 2016 post-election impasse, which saw ousted former President Yahya Jammeh moved to Equatorial Guinea, where he has been taking refuge since January 2017.
The words elephant and room
Come
to mind straight away. The elephant in the room. They talked about bilateral commitments, about arrangements for people with diplomatic passports. But according to the president, Barrow, ex-president Jammeh did not come up as a topic. Although in the speech he did thank his host for helping in the impasse by offering to host ex-president Jammeh, and he still resides there. Were you surprised that we heard that this did not come up as a topic of conversation?
Absolutely. Well, the first question I asked was, how credible is that, given that the Jammeh issue, given that we've had this summit meeting just immediately in the wake of the white paper. I mean, really, the Jammeh issue, the implementation of the white paper, the TRRC report white paper, that's really the biggest political story.
Yes, indeed.
Right now on all of it. So the idea that they had not talked about it, and I thought maybe he was just being diplomatic. So they used this language.
Sure.
And so, sort of showing discretion.
Sure.
There are certain things you shouldn't say out in public because they're going on behind the scenes.
Yes,
We've had this
because
sort of thing all over the world.
It can happen.
Yes. And that sort of thing. So I find the idea that nothing was spoken about Jammeh and all this, but quite incredible.
Sure. That aside, because as we've been told, nothing like that was said. They talked about strengthening bilateral ties, business ties, and otherwise. And of course, it's a country, bigger in terms of economy, and one that it might be good to do business with. Although I'm not sure what sort of business we could do with them, but nonetheless, this is a country where, of course, they have a president who has been elected, but shall we say, there have been questions about his continued stay in office. So it was quite interesting because the meeting you talked about, the ECOWAS meeting, they talked about people prolonging their stay in office, fiddling the constitution to suit themselves, and here we had somebody who's actually been accused of that quite a lot.
When we were younger, our parents were very careful sort of the company we kept.
Indeed.
There's a good lesson in that. There's a good thing to learn in that. So here we are told that they've got 4 agreements.
Yes, that's right.
The joint communique on the establishment of diplomatic relations between our two countries.
That's right.
Which led me to the question, I wonder why we never had it before. And the second one, yes, and the cooperation framework agreement. You see, and all of these things, MOU on diplomatic consultations between the foreign ministries.
Yes.
And reciprocal exemption of visas to holders of diplomatic and service passports and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So with me, when I hear these things, the next question is often, okay, we've got these agreements. So what actions would these agreements lead me to?
Well, this is it, because they're talking about moving from words to commitment or words to that effect. As you said, because there's not ever been much of a kind of interaction between ourselves and Equatorial Guinea. What are we expecting from this? I would have liked to have heard something practical, diplomatic visas and so on. This is the kind of thing that we should take as routine across Africa. I wouldn't have thought an MOU was required for that, for us to honor each other's, diplomatic passports. But nonetheless, it's there, and this came out in the communique and even in the press conference that the two presidents had afterwards.
And we were told about the natural gas.
Yes.
So much of it. How
That's
can
right.
we benefit? How can we work around that? Even though the language used, at least in this report that I read, was we can learn from their expertise.
Well, this is it, because of course there is the promise of the Gambia itself becoming an oil and gas producing nation. And of course, for their expertise, I guess what we can't learn from them if you went online is that there's been quite a lot of criticism of how the oil wealth from there has been squandered and concentrated in the hands of very few. We certainly don't want to learn from that. But, it's interesting because, yes, they are oil producing country, obviously. And that's something that definitely we could tap into the expertise, because it's something we always say African countries don't seem to do. They go and drag, expatriates from, America or Europe, and yet there are all these other African countries that are doing, what you're about to do. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And we've got groundnuts.
Well,
You've
indeed.
also mentioned that.
That's right.
So can we have a scheme where we can exchange the stuff?
Yes.
So all of that understood.
Sure.
It just depends on what the agreements are,
Sure.
how we're going to implement, and we just make sure that, because in the end, yes, there is this Pan-African thing, the AU thing, and all of that. But in the end, Gambia is Gambia. I have to be honest with you. I'm very pragmatic about stuff like
One
that.
has to be.
Yeah.
We have to be honest.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
I have to be honest. So I want my president to go and negotiate so I can have the best out of
Yes.
the situation.
Indeed.
I know how small I am. I know that my bargaining power isn't that much.
Right.
I know all of that. But the little that I can do, let's just do it very well. So for me, this is how I think. So now, in the end, we will see. And even this idea of Aubameyang, so crucial. We're thanking him for what he did in 2016.
Yes.
This is very interesting. But he helped us for all the wrong reasons.
He might say he stopped a cataclysmic situation from possibly developing.
Yahya
because-
Jammeh possibly couldn't have chosen anywhere else.
Well, this is true. This is true.
But
It's far
Equatorial
enough.
Guinea, this is why I said that.
Yes.
He helped us for all the wrong reasons.
Yes, yes, yes.
So, yes, I will give you some credit if you like, but again, not much.
Oh dear, oh dear. Sorry, President Obiang. Not much credit from Mr. Mboj, but thank you for that. Which takes us on to our second story. If you earn money as somebody who's paid a monthly wage, I suspect your pay has not gone up 11.7%. Well, inflation has gone from 8.2 to 11.7%. Why? Let's find out. Have a look.
Inflationary pressures continue to persist, with headline inflation accelerating from 8.2% in March 2022 to 11.7% in April 2022. The significant rise in inflation is driven primarily by the surge in food inflation, which picked up from 9.2% in March 2022 to 11.6% in April 2022.
Boa Sedi there, Governor of the Central Bank, telling us. Mr. Mboj, I think for some people, those who bothered to delve into this, the shock was that rise is over a very short period, 3.5% rise. And we're all feeling the pinch, surely.
Absolutely, because with us common folk, we are not economists. When we hear of the word inflation, well, we can make certain connections.
Sure, sure.
Prices will go up.
That is it.
And this is really what we're worried about. Yeah. So in our current situation, obviously, we know about the external shock.
Yes, and this is where they put the blame, you know, the supply chain, because we depend so much on import. And we keep saying this, if this is not a wake-up call, I mean, I don't know how many wake-up calls one needs. You know, COVID gave us a nasty wake-up call when supply chain was interrupted because there were no shipments and there were no freight other than, you know, medicines and so on. And everybody said, yeah, you know, now we've realized we've woken up. We need to start seeing if we can rely less on imports. But we're still relying on imports. And of course, the costs of those imports are going up and up for all sorts of things, from fuel to food stuff.
Yes. So the mature people will see that Gambia is not isolated. The whole world is doing it. This is what's happening. Sure. But again, we will see something else. Different Minister of Finance, you know, how different countries are responding to cope with this. Sure. So it is on the basis of our response that we will judge our government. That was the whole reason why this monetary policy rate was, put up because they said that they could try to curb inflation.
That's right.
So I am not an economist. The wisdom of that, how can I judge that? Sure. But even then, I know that different economists will have different opinions.
Sure.
So we cannot move away from that either. Sure. You know what I mean? So for us, it's about what works. How quickly should we expect to see differences? Sure. Or rather, even more basic than that, whatever we put in, how much could it contribute?
Right.
You see, one simply needs the realistic picture, then it's easier to sell that. Then you can get people on your side.
This is it, because to get people on your side, you hear it in the office, commodity prices are going up. You know, sugar, flour, people eat bread a lot, rice, of course. You know, all of these imported stuff, all those commodities, these are things that, they're not luxuries, they're people's staples that they have every day. And those commodity prices are shooting up, and they're not just going up in fractions, quite significantly. And yet people are thinking, well, you know, my pay's not going. So if you want to explain inflation to somebody, that kind of, you know, well, they'll say, oh, you know, shrug and say, what's the impact? Then you can point to that and say, that is the impact.
That's it.
You know?
So, but this is the important thing. With government, once I'm honest, say, I'm assuming too much here, I'm honest, I'm talking to my people. We know they've also been complaining about individual businessmen, the sort of unethical stuff that they do, which is impacting on the business. Sure. We know that our problem is really collective, even though we've got the scapegoat we'll call government. That's it. So even some of us who come and complain all the time, just look at what we do at our place of work. So we get all of these things, the hoarding, and recently didn't the central bank give an instruction
about foreign exchange.
About foreign exchange, and that also has to do with inflation. Yes, this terrible thing called inflation.
Well, indeed, because as you said, you know, the bank mentioned the fact that, you know, people were kind of hoarding, you know, foreign exchange, and they tweaked the rules somewhat and said, you know, and they gave one brilliant example. Say, when you go to the market to buy something, you don't buy in dollars. So why, for example, is somebody saying to you, you want to rent this building for 6 months or a year, pay me in dollars or pay me in euros? That's unacceptable. And it's sort of, you know, it impacts the market greatly.
So this is the key. What is the science of what I'm doing, and then the enforcement, the implementation, and all the rest of it, that's another angle. But we know really the gravity of the problem. We all know the gravity of the problem.
And we all
People
feel
who genuinely want to solve the problem, you really do not restrict your analysis to simply government, because we know the connection between what we are.
Exactly, that's the kind of lazy option, just saying, oh, government will sort it.
Lazy option. So this is the problem. So we look at our situation now, how the economy is going. We'll see what impact this decision will have.
Indeed, I think in a month's time or two, we'll go back and revisit. Thanks for that, Mr. Ambrose. Thank you. And now on to our third story. This one, something that we've been going on about for quite a long time. Mr. Mboj and I have discussed this in the office. We've discussed this on programs on TV here. And it's to do with Brikama Fish Market. I won't spoil it for you. Have a look and be horrified. Have a look.
Speaking to QTV after issuing the order of immediate closure, Mahmoud Ba, the FSQS Director General, said the inspection generally saw gross violation of food safety laws, adding that the FSQA is the sole authority mandated to officially do this, and as such cannot allow the market to continue operating under such conditions.
And this is also where people buy food, people sell food, and the food that is being sold here under these horrible conditions are not fit for consumption by anyone. And as a result, the Food Safety and Quality Authority, with our mandate, we have to make sure that we at least enforce what is to the best interest of the country and for the consumers, so that at least we try and make sure that people are not buying food that is detrimental to their health, that will give them diseases, and that will give their children and grandchildren serious diseases.
You saw and you heard the horror story. Mr. Mboj, because QTV News goes out online, I and others had sort of alerted people that this was going to be broadcast, people outside of the Gambia, on Twitter, Facebook and so on. And people contacted me from America and from Sweden and from England. And they don't know each other, but they all asked me the same question. How was this allowed to happen? Mm-hmm. How did it get to that stage? Mm-hmm. I ask you that question.
No,
who allowed it to get to that stage?
Absolutely. You know, we dealt with this on a radio show,
That's right.
the drive time. For me, it was interesting that the chairman of the market committee, well, at least from our translation, that was why you suggested that possibly lost in translation.
Yeah, quite.
When he said that, really, he had no problem with the closure, but only the timing, that sort of thing.
Quite.
So already, if we're going to try to identify gaps, as it were, in the management of this place, then that kind of thinking, that pattern of thinking already exposes one.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah, I was quite shocked. I couldn't believe it. I would go ballistic if I were heading. I don't have a problem with that.
You know, exactly.
So that sort of thing. So, but then here, the Food Safety and Quality Authority.
That's right.
We spoke to the Director of Regulatory Affairs, Mary Johnson.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then said, yes. I was asked, when did you make the assessment? Said about 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Fine. But afterwards in the discussion, one realized that they had been giving them notices.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
In the past,
they had what they call improvement notices.
Improvement notices,
yes.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But still, it's not happening. And then I moved on to the other question. Okay, when these things happen, what you've done here, the closure, that's really very serious. There must be implications. Yeah. So the market management committee, now, who is going to be held accountable for this?
Sure. And are there any penalties besides?
Are there any penalties
besides it being closed?
For being closed? Because when you deal with these things, Ade, it's not about just fixing the Brikama fish market.
No, quite.
It is about having a structure. You just don't want to be sort of merely reacting to these ad hoc situations. Yes. You want to have a strategy, a clear stuff, then you're implementing everywhere. Because this is what we've been doing, haven't we?
Well, this is it. And for me, what was instructive, is it was said that, this was because of concerns raised by the public. You and I have colleagues working here at QTV who live in Brikama, and they've been talking about this for over a year. We did a story about it over a year ago. Surely the authorities must have seen that story. Maybe they watch another channel, I don't know. But that got quite a lot of reaction at the time, about 12, maybe 14 months ago. And then, we come to this situation. I mean, when people saw it, they were quite horrified. But also, I mean, not that this will make the people in Brikama feel any better. There are other markets that we know of, certainly of the ones that I know in the kind of greater Banjul area, let me say, that are equally in a foul state. and might be visited and shut down. But again, we go back to, you mentioned the sort of the committee. Somebody mentioned in that story, we pay $50 a day, and he said quite reasonably, what are we paying for if the people we paid to aren't cleaning this up? But also, I then said, okay, that's fine, but for us, the public, we are at fault. For me, the market nearest me, I have said I would never buy food there again. Maybe everybody can't make that bold decision. But because we go there and we buy in these disgusting conditions, they will sell to us in these disgusting conditions. We need to raise hell. But the good thing about that is we were told that it was actually the public who raised the concern, not the people running it. Yeah. I mean, isn't that instructive?
It is very much so, because you'll keep on asking all sorts of questions we know about. I think we more or less agree about the deficiencies of the committee and all the rest of it. Then you must also ask other questions. The people who set up shop in these unhygienic spots, what's the motivation? Yeah. Somebody can come with the sentimental idea that, well, if they do not do this, they need to have a form of livelihood and all of these things. Then at what price? Sure. By setting up here, is that really contributing to my having a form of livelihood? Sure. You know what I mean? There are very difficult questions. I think that we should be asking of each other, of one another. Indeed. Difficult questions, but it seems that we don't do that. Then you also have the buyer. You know, that's it. We also go in these unhygienic situations, we also go and buy them. Yeah. So what we call stakeholders, you have so many different factors, so many different actors into all of these things. And then it leads me to this wonderful question, very, very philosophical question. What are the ethics of personal responsibility in a non-ideal world?
Sure.
I know what my people are doing. I know what the council is doing. I know what the market management committee, what they're doing. I know all of these things. But I, as an ordinary citizen, in this awful, difficult situation, what are my personal ethics? We can never dodge that by merely blaming, oh, government hasn't done this, government hasn't done that, therefore I will do the wrong thing.
This is it. But perhaps they did do the right thing by, as they said, it was the public that raised the concern. So
fantastic. Chink in the armor.
So we hope that continues.
Fantastic.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And that takes us on to our fourth story to look at. Now, Republic of China, People's Republic of China, has been a very good friend to the Gambia. And they've made all sorts of contributions to the Gambia in terms of infrastructure, health, etc., including sending, medical teams to the Gambia. Have a look.
This is going to be, as I said, is going to be a booster to what is already existing, what we have already in the system. Though we have a lot of medical personnel, but it's not enough. So with their comment, obviously, they are going to feel a very huge vacuum. Because if you look at patients to doctor ratio or patient to nurses ratio, is very huge. So with their comment, obviously, they are going to reduce the gap greatly and immensely. And, the queuing to wait for one doctor, obviously, is going to reduce.
Now, this is where I'm going to report myself both to Mr. Mboj and to the viewers. He mentioned doctor-patient ratio, and I had it written down, but I've just realized I've left it on my desk. Suffice to say that it is quite a shocking ratio, and amongst the lowest in the world, in the Gambia. But I mentioned in the lead up to that this is the fifth team of doctors that the Republic of China, People's Republic of China, has sent to the Gambia. As I said, they're very, very much needed. And of course, we welcome this, surely.
Of course. And this doctor-nurse ratio to patients, we've done stories on this. It's really quite low. Yeah, it's just that you cannot get the figure exactly. Yeah. But you know where it falls in the rank. Sure.
It's in the bottom 10% in the world.
The bottom. So absolutely, how can anybody say that? How can anybody knock it?
Yeah.
But again, I went back. I'm told that according to, I think in our report, or I've read this somewhere, from 1977, to
Yes.
1995. See, we've been dealing with the Chinese for a long time.
True.
That is why, for me, this sort of new way, I think, is Western-driven, really, idea of seeing the Chinese as sinister. My perspective,
Yeah.
my experience doesn't give me
doesn't
that.
give us that. It doesn't give us that.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've had people who've been there on scholarships, and they've been trained as doctors, nurses, engineers. We've had them come here, build infrastructure, and so on. Of course, for the West, the fact that China of 30 years ago was not considered anything much, and now China is rivaling the United States of America as the world's biggest economy. That is the problem for them, if they're honest about it. There are other ideological differences, of course. But of course, as you say, we in Africa will never see it like that, because that's not been our experience of dealing with them.
Absolutely. I have to be honest to my experience.
Yeah.
Maybe what I might ask is that from 1977, we are told, to 1995, we've had more than 200 medical personnel and that sort of thing. So I'm thinking that, okay, cumulatively, all these interventions, what's been the cumulative effect? In what direction is it moving? You've just said to me there that the doctor-nurse ratio is so low. You see, for me, this is really what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
I don't want these collaborations, this help, this support, all of it, to be merely ad hoc. I want everything to be leading to something much bigger.
Yes, I'll tell you, I'll intervene there, because I actually looked at the Sierra Leone experience, where they've had similar things.
Right.
And one of the reasons why it remains low is that both the Gambia and Sierra Leone have very good training for medical practitioners and nurses, but the leakage of them going to the West. In Sierra Leone, every year it numbers in the several hundreds. In the Gambia, it's the low hundreds, but nonetheless, that leakage where people are attracted, they will be, by the fact that they'll get more, much better paid, is why what we're seeing from China, as welcome as it is, it's kind of sticking a plaster over a gaping wound. And so because we're always having these people leave the system, doctors and nurses, we rely on the likes of China coming in to patch things up. And it's never going to be enough, much as we welcome it.
I said, if not China, then Cuba. They've got their medical brigade. But this is precisely my point. The multi-dimensional sort of nature of our difficulties. So there is no point for me to be bringing this. Then all that I'm doing, yes, I will help lots of individuals, which is a good thing, but I've got this relationship to have a wider, much bigger impact. I cannot be feeding in, giving with one hand, and then you have the leakage on the other.
The other bit,
This is why we talk about today holistic approaches to these things. So for me, this is the level at which I'm going to think about these things. Fantastic with the Chinese and all of that. But the leakages, otherwise I'm not going to see the effect. So I simply cannot say, oh, fantastic, and just enjoying it. But again, the wider stuff is not happening. I'll keep on banging on that until it does.
I think in some countries now, they tell them that if you are trained by us, you have to commit in your contract to a certain number of years, or we will not give you a passport that would allow you to leave the country, because if you did, you probably wouldn't come back. So maybe we need to be as brutal as that.
Whatever we need to do, I mean, it takes tough decisions. This is really what the problem is. It takes very, very tough decisions, and we need to be consistent and coherent. So the leakage, I think, is because of this lack of coherence. One part of the system is doing one thing, whereas the other part is undermining it. So this consistency and coherence, to my mind, this is what gives me sustainability.
Good. Sustainability is what we need. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Thank you. But as I said, we're grateful for the help, and of course we always will be. Takes us on to our fifth story. Road safety. Again, you say, oh, here he goes again, one of his obsessions, one of his many obsessions. Yeah, I'm afraid so. When the death rate comes down on the roads, I'll shut up. Until then, have a look, have a listen.
Our roads have become death traps as more lives are claimed daily due to road traffic accidents. In March this year, 40 people lost their lives to road traffic accidents. These stakeholders from civil society organizations, the transport union, the security sector, the National Roads Authority and others are looking for solutions to save lives. In the time span for 3 years, between 2017 to 2020, the Gambia went from being ranked 8th in the world to 4th among accident hotspot zones. Ndeye Bakurin, the executive director of Tango, describes the menace as unfortunate, adding that the lack of discipline on our roads is among factors resulting in the frequent accidents. John Charles Njai, the chairman of the Association of Non-Governmental Organization, Tango, applauded the committee for taking up the responsibility to help address this worrisome issue.
Mobile division does what is right, man the traffic in such a way that anybody that is found wanting, violating traffic rules is held responsible, and if need be, let us tighten the laws.
And you can deport me after this next feature. Frankly, I don't think we care enough, Mr. Mboj, and I have to say that quite bluntly, because if we did, we wouldn't have such horrific figures. And I say this because even yesterday, on my way home, it had just turned dark. And I actually stopped at one of the checkpoints, and I said, I beg your pardon, day before yesterday, and I said to the police there, in a kind of friendly way, I said, I've just seen 2 cars go by in the opposite direction. It's 9 o'clock. Neither of them had lights. Why didn't you stop them and pull them over? So we can talk all the talk we want about, road traffic division, need to do this, need to do that. And again, people can say the government ought to do this, but it's not the government driving those cars without lights. It's individuals. Those individuals know they got no lights because you flash them to tell them that your light's on, or you flick on and off, and they don't respond, because they don't have lights. And they know they don't have lights, and yet they've just gone through a checkpoint. And so we keep having these numbers going up and up and up, 40 people dying in a month on the roads. Where will this madness end, and how will it end, Mr. Mboj?
Yes, sir. So you called it in the introduction that you've been obsessing about it. I said there's a very good reason why we should continue to obsess about it until the sky comes down.
Honestly, exactly I will not stop until...
What was going to happen there. So now here, what do we have? They've called it a multi-stakeholder volunteer committee.
Sure.
With what is the motto? Road safety first.
That's right. That's right.
NRA, CSOs, and on all the rest of it. Granted, discuss it, come up with ideas.
Sure.
But for me, the thing is, what is the most optimal mechanism to achieve our goals? I mean, because over the years, we've had so many discussions and workshops. We have all sorts of things.
Sure.
It appears as if we do not have ideas that I can implement that would impact the situation.
The I word, implement.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that's why I love this way of analyzing these things. Whatever you tell me that's what we're going to do, or whatever ideas you tell me about things, the first question, what actions would this idea lead me to?
Quite.
Absolutely. So I think perhaps there is a problem with what actions these ideas would lead me to, and who is going to monitor to make sure that we take these actions.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, for me, as we saw there, this is not a government initiative, and it has taken concerned citizens to actually bring all the people together, including the police, including people from the transport sector. But you and I know that unscientifically, if you went out on the streets now, 50 to 60% of the cars would not pass a motor ordnance test, an MOT test. They're not fit to be on the roads. And yet we thought, they have to earn a living, so let them go. And then when the brakes fail and they crash and kill people, everybody goes to their funerals, we pray and so on. But really, we need to get brutal about this if we're going to get serious about curbing this. Because I'm telling you this, and anybody watching this, you can quote me on this. If the figures carry on for 1 more year, at the rate they're going, Gambia will be #1 in the world for road traffic accidents and deaths. #1 in the world. A country of just over 2.whatever million people, that is a disgrace.
Absolutely.
Honestly.
Absolutely.
So, we can have all these concerned citizens and so on. But if we don't implement things, if we do not take strict measures to stop it, to curb it, the figures will keep going up. And we're not doing anything. You know, they will validate stuff at a meeting such as this. As I said, they had all the stakeholders, the police, road authorities, CSOs, and so on. Is anybody going to do anything about it?
Absolutely. And this is the thing. When you have the structural deficiencies, to some extent, they encourage certain attitudes. Yes.
Quite.
Because you know, for someone like me, I take taxis every day.
Yeah.
The $10 and stuff. So we interact with drivers all the time, and it also really gives us an opportunity to listen to what people are talking about.
Sure.
Having your ear to the ground.
Yeah, sure.
It's a very fantastic way of things.
Yeah.
But this is it. You see all these kids, they behave anyhow they like. There will be no consequences. We know what the attitudes are right there on the ground. Never mind what the police say. Never mind what the authorities say. We know what is going on the ground there. But this is it. This is part of the legacy that we've just come out of.
Sure.
That is why everybody is talking about institutional reform.
Sure.
There is institutional damage,
For sure.
whether we want to accept it or not.
For sure.
And perhaps there are people who are manning these institutions, they do not have the capacity to do it.
Sure.
But we are just being, you know, how Gambians the way we are like. But there are tough decisions to be taken. Sure. There is a deep-seated institutional damage in the society. Without that, we are never going to see any results.
There you are. There you go. And honestly, I am not encouraged. I'm sorry, as I said, you can deport me, but I don't see attitudinal change, which is required to change this ridiculous situation around. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And that takes us to the halfway point of our program. We'll take a break, and after the break, guess what? We'll have 5 more stories. Don't go away. Join us after this break.
As the fastest growing GSM company in the Gambia, QCell has the widest 4G plus coverage in the country, 3 times faster internet speed than our competitors. So switch now and dial *335# and enjoy what true 4G feels like. QCell, Gambia's trusted network.
Welcome back. You are watching QTV and you are watching The Week in Review. I'm your host, Adi Darami, and I have my co-host, Mr. Mamodu Mboj. Mr. Mboj, thank you for the interjections for the 5 stories so far.
My pleasure.
Now, I said we had 5 more stories to go. This next one is to do with an insecticide that has been banned by the Environment Agency. Not just any insecticide, a particularly brutal one. Have a look, have a listen.
Ingredients that are lethal to human health. So in that, even you are applying at outdoor level, it has those implications. Now, if you do it at indoor level, which we are using it at indoor level more, because most of our homes, we use it to address these cockroaches, these bed bugs, and other bugs that are found in our compound. So it has, when you are exposed to it, from the ingredient point of view, when you are exposed to it, you are subjected to respiratory issues and many other problems that is not good for the people.
Many other problems that are not good for the people. Mr. Mboj, what was instructive is that when we went up with this story, I had colleagues in the office said, yes, I use it in my house. But when I use it, I tell the family to move out for a day or so. And I said, please go and read the packaging, because it says quite clearly this is not for indoor use. But because it's been found to be so effective in killing these blasted insects, the ban is fine. But again, we've been talking about weak sort of enforcement and so on. It's just going to start a black market, isn't it, surely?
Absolutely. And the people, it was, I know when I heard that, I was upset a bit because I thought the people who work for us more educated. Before I use anything, I will read it. This is the mark of a modern, educated person.
Yeah.
So that one was a disappointment to me, I have to say. Yeah, I think if change is going to come, it's going to start from us. And what, 2019, apparently there was a moratorium.
That's right.
A temporary ban. But why is it a problem now? This is what we've been talking about.
Yes.
The what do you call it? The enforcement and people's attitude. Because we've been going out to buy them.
This is it. One of the stories regarding why they think there is a ban is because there's a case about 3 weeks ago when an individual actually drank it and killed himself after a family argument. And they thought that if people are going to start using it for suicide, and I was told by a colleague, although I don't know how true, that this was the second in about the space of a year where somebody had ingested it and had ended up killing themselves. But the others who mentioned it to us, they told us how pungent it was, and how, as one of them said, you could not even stay in the house for a good 24 hours. But of course, when you came back, all the bugs were dead. And so people were willing to put up with that, and you fear that that might be the temptation still. And because, yes, we talk about people being educated, being able to read it and say not for indoor use, but when their next door neighbor is telling them, well, you know, you might not want to use it, but, you know, I use it and it killed all the bugs, there's that kind of societal pressure that people succumb to. But we come to the ban. We know that there are tons and tons of the stuff in the country. Are they going to go around and seize those and destroy? What is to happen? Otherwise, as I said, they'll be selling it under the counter because people find it so effective.
Absolutely. So that will always be a question mark because of our history of implementation. It seems to some extent we are at the mercy of circumstances, unless perhaps you have people saying, no, I'm not going to buy that because of A and B reasons and stuff like that. If somebody wants to use it for suicide, I cannot blame the thing.
Because they might be going through, they would have found another method.
That sort of thing. Sheikh Anta Diop sort of once used this curious, interesting phrase. He called it the logical availability of the mind.
And what was he referring to?
Stuff like that. When science tells me that I should maybe take my vaccine, take it, the logical availability of the mind to analyze, deal with circumstances. The other day when I spoke to, what's his name, Dr. Jahi Isa, he gave me this Swahili word meaning tradition with reason. I think this is precisely what Sheikh Anta Diop was saying. I am not going to listen to the idea that, oh, you know, this is our tradition, this is our custom, this is our that. My tradition, my customs must answer to reason. We must constantly try, all these bodies try to give as much information to people. We need to know the information. But again, with civil society organizations, all of us, we have a lot of work to do amongst ourselves.
That's true.
You know, this is why you've got these conspiracy theories, this the culture of repudiation because it comes from the West is necessarily wrong. I'm like, be subtle. Some things are wrong, others not necessarily so. So this dogmatism, this encystic dogmas, there's a lot of work to do, Ade.
A lot of work to do. On that point, I think it's a good point to end. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. It takes us on to our seventh story, job fairs. In many countries outside of Africa, certainly, these are common things. But we've recently had one here, and I was really, really pleased to see this. What's he talking about, you're saying? Have a look.
Yesterday it was a huge turnout. It was so overwhelmed. We spent like 2 hours trying to sensitize, taking details, receiving CVs and application. There are so much desperations with employees who are graduated and yet to secure employment. So I want to encourage employers to see how we can be attending such programs. As this youth, we can get them to gain gainful employment within the society.
There we heard talk of job fair. People brought their CVs, they brought applications. And as I was saying, I mean, having done my last sort of year at school in England, these were quite common. not only that, you actually had people whose job in the school was actually to kind of help pupils get jobs. And so job fairs were held at the end of term and so on. And, you know, careers advisor, that's the term I was looking for. You had careers advisors attached to the school. And that was, and so throughout the year, people would go to them and they'd talk about it. They'd say, oh, well, you know, with these marks, are you sure you want to be a doctor? Because these marks will never get you into the, and so on. But this is new for us. And so when I saw it and they said that, you know, they had quite a good turnout, people had really embraced the idea. I was really quite pleased. I mean, I wonder what were your thoughts on it?
Absolutely. I went through that element of career advisors and stuff like that. Sure. So part of our high school. Absolutely. So here, when I looked at who organized it, you've got the Gambia German Advisory Center.
Yes.
For jobs training and reintegration. I was going that reintegration. So here we go again. Immigration. Oh boy. And the Ministry of Trade. You see, with these things, you got to have agencies and to be having job fairs regularly. Yeah, I don't want the Ministry of Education to be there. You cannot be in all places at all. It doesn't work like that. So create the sort of agencies in different
Chamber
areas.
Of Commerce,
Chamber of Commerce, GCCI, all others. Then you have job centers. So job centers periodically would have these job fairs, and then throughout the year you'll be connecting job seekers with the employers. This is how it works. You must have a mechanism in place. So when I look at these things, it's okay, fine, but I don't know, where is the sustainability? Where does it go?
Well, apparently what they were doing is they were matching people with their CVs to jobs that they'd received from, you know, employers who were looking for employees. And so you had this marriage, because we don't have job centers, as you said, you know, in England, certainly when I was at school and college, immediately you left, you could go into a job center initially, and I saw the progress from when you went and you spoke to somebody to when they computerized it. You could come and you can tap in what your qualifications were, and then a whole bunch of jobs would come up, and you think, oh, let me take down the notes for this one and contact them and so on, and that kind of thing. So apparently what they're doing is they're playing kind of marriage counselor, bringing the ones looking for jobs together with the ones who are looking for
that's it. But this will require a kind of secretariat.
Sure.
Just as over there with the job centers, so they're always liaising. It's there every day.
And
you
it shouldn't be it shouldn't be the Gambian German advisory center.
No. That should be really. Give me the money if you're going to do that, or the trainers if you're going to do that. But I must set up the mechanism, the structures, and that sort of thing. So, to my mind, this is really the key. It must be a longer term, more interactive, all the time. Job centers.
And I think the word you used earlier, sustainability.
Sustainability, yeah.
Let's hope. Thank you.
That's really the key.
Thank you for that. And now on to something not quite connected, but I confess here, I was involved. I was the chief judge on the Youth of the Month, Youth of the Year award, and I really enjoyed it. Have a look.
Prior to the award ceremony, the nominees were assigned to conduct surveys and mapped out projects on how the communities can solve the identified issues. The identified villages were Abuko, Bakau, Sanyang, Sukuta, and Yundum in the West Coast region. The nominees for the finals were Alassane Drame, Fatima Mulashi, and Mamadou Jane. The project proposals were graded by the villages themselves, who awarded a maximum 3 points before the award ceremony. At the award ceremony, all the nominees had to present again solutions on the challenges facing the Sukuta Health Center. During the presentation in Sukuta, the village had awarded them a point each, as they had all correctly identified the health center as a priority project.
There you heard my colleague, Mr. Troy. Mr. Mboj, as I said, I was judge there. I was quite pleased to get involved in it because, in fact, the reason I got involved was because they'd heard that I'd been involved in similar projects in England and in Sierra Leone. And we had 3 very good contestants there. And as a judge, I can say this, it was very, very tough for us to actually find a winner, but obviously somebody had to win. But what I liked about it was that they sent them out into communities. They said, don't go and tell them that you know everything. Ask them what their problems are, see whether you can solve them. a brilliant idea, surely.
Fantastic stuff. You know, we interviewed during our program, our drive time programs, when we interviewed one of the organizers, the Balance Crew.
Yeah, the Balance Crew.
And I love their name and the reason why they call the Balance Crew, trying to balance education and innovation.
Sure.
I love these two terms. That's it for this task, for the criteria as it were to win this sort of award, the tasks that they were given, local solutions. I love that.
Yeah,
I mean, I wasn't surprised that climate change had to come in. Otherwise, perhaps we wouldn't even get funding. This is what we've been talking about now with the agenda. There are certain topics.
Of course, yes.
You might get funding, but others you will not.
Sure.
No, not to say that it's not a problem.
No,
it's not a problem.
Right.
But I wish that the initiative would sort of come from me. So this is, I loved it.
Yeah.
I love the idea.
Sure.
Maybe we should have a lot more and provide platforms for people, so you can tease out the creativity in
people. And I must give a caveat here. I mean, we've got 5 minutes and we've got two more stories. But just to say that the villages that we dealt with were in the West Coast region for logistical purposes. But next year, it is intended that this will be a genuine, across the board, a real national one. So one to look forward to, and well done to the Balance Crew for that one. Thank you for that, Mr. Burge. And as I said, 5 more minutes and a couple more stories. Next one, Ministry of Fisheries have launched the Gambia Climate Smart Rural Water Sanitation and Hygiene Development Project, WASH. What's it about? Have a look.
This project was formulated in 2018, and it's a 5-year project and hopes to end in 2023. We are halfway or almost towards the end of the project, but as you all know, during implementation we encountered the COVID and also a lot of other issues in between. So hopefully we'll have to extend the project for a year or two to be able to achieve all the key objectives of the project.
Officials say the project will directly benefit an estimated 200,000 rural and peri-urban Gambians, particularly women and children, who are expected to live healthier lives and trek lesser distances to fetch water. An additional 300,000 people will benefit from the interventions in improved solid and liquid waste management, in addition to the betterment of the rapidly deteriorating aquatic environment.
There you heard our colleague Omar P. Jallow, to improve equitable access to safe and affordable water supply and sanitation. Again, you said in relation to the other one, who can argue about something like this? Again, like I said at the top of the hour, not every story is going to be afforded the same amount of time. So this one really is just, again, we kind of give it a tick box and said it's a brilliant initiative, and we hope it can. In the thing there, it was actually mentioned the implementation has been delayed slightly, but they're hoping to get it through to a completion.
Yes, sir. 5-year period project, but again, because of one reason or another, the COVID and others, they're asking for extension. So this is what we are told, what, more than $40 million?
That's right,
project.
It's huge. Yeah.
200,000 rural peri-urban Gambians would benefit, an additional 300,000 and all of these things.
Sure.
Granted.
Yeah.
Give us the timeline.
Yeah. Exactly.
So,
yes.
What have we achieved so far? Maybe we have our job cut out for us.
Sure.
It's been 5 years. We want an extension, but so far, what has been achieved?
Well, and it's interesting because the 5 years end in 2023, and already they're talking about extending it. We haven't even got to 2023 yet, and it would have been nice to know. Yes, COVID and so on. What else impacted on it that you're already speaking of having an extension?
Absolutely, and it would have been interesting to say that yes, even though COVID has impacted on this, obviously. It reduced, as it were, the potential performance.
Indeed.
But this is what we've achieved so far.
Yes, indeed.
The way they've given us the numbers about who should benefit.
That's right.
But
Who's benefited so far?
So far, what have you achieved?
Sure. Yeah.
What are the numbers?
Quite.
You don't get that. You need to ask that.
We will indeed. Thank you for that, Mr. Burge. And this brings us on to our final story. A prison escape, or was it a prison break? You decide. Have a look.
According to the Deputy PRO of the Gambia Prison Services, Luke Jetta, 2 inmates who are on remand as they are on trial for burglary and theft escaped from Mile 2 Central Prisons last Friday, the 28th of May. Responding to reports circulating on social media, Jetta states that it was a prison escape and not a prison break as reported.
And this was what the social media platform indicated, saying recent jailbreak at Mile 2 Central Prison. And then this alone is alarming when you say jailbreak. Meaning that means that there was an affray, that means there was scuffle, there was mutiny that had led to this escape. But to us, it's not a prison break, because if it was prison break, we would have seen the evidence of prison break.
Listen, I don't want to, I almost didn't want to comment on this because we heard Mr. Luke Jatta there, Mr. Jatta. A prison break and a prison escape are one and the same thing. It doesn't mean you physically break the walls. It just means you break out of prison by whatever means. Whether you scale the walls or you walk through you have broken through the gates and you've gone somewhere. Mr. Mboj, as I said, I almost didn't want to comment on this, and time is our enemy, but,
but for him,
last word to you.
Yes, for him, jailbreak sort of implies
a scuffle,
mutiny and all of that. For me, what I thought was just pure pedantry.
It really was.
That's it. So in your own technical parlance, all of that, you don't blame the reporter for not having that technical, as it were, jargon, having the command of the jargon. But did prisoners escape or not? I think we agree on that.
This is it.
What's the problem, sir?
This is it. What's the problem? And I think on that note, I mean, to call a press conference just to clarify that it was an escape, not a break, was a bit too much. And that brings us nicely to the end of the program. As ever, Mr. Mboj, thank you for your interjections and interventions. And as ever, to the viewers, thank you for watching. And for those who've just been listening, thank you for listening. Until next week, bye.